Come,
join,
arise,
and shine.
Wish you all the best.
FX Polytechnic College, Tharuvai, Tirunelveli, 8 km from New Bus Stand.
Good evening to all. On behalf of our management and our civil department, I welcome you all for this wonderful webinar regarding the challenges and the opportunities in durability design of RC structures. Especially, I invite our resource person, Mr. Sundar, research scholar, for this webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce our resource person, Mr. Sundar. He did his UG and PG in Tyagaraja College of Engineering. Now he is doing doctorate at IIT Madras. He also worked in CCL as graduate engineer trainee, and also he worked as teaching fellow at College of Engineering, Guindy. He is very eminent research scholar. He has published 3 international journals, 1 national journal, and also 13 papers in various conferences. We welcome you, sir, for this webinar. At last, I welcome all the participants from various colleges. Welcome you all. I hand over this session to our resource person, Mr. Sundar.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sundar from IIT Madras. I am a research scholar there, working on the topic corrosion in concrete structures. Today, I am going to present a seminar on the topic challenges and opportunities in durability-based design of reinforced concrete structures. First of all, I would like to thank the opportunity given to me to present in this webinar by the beloved principal and then chairman of your institution. And I would like to thank the Department of Civil Engineering and Mrs. Chitra for inviting me for giving this lecture. So let us go to the topic. So this is just a brief introduction about me, and now I have been doing my PhD for past 5 years, and previous to that, I was working as a teaching fellow in CEG, and I was a graduate engineer trainee in CCL also. This is my small profile about myself. And now going to the presentation. So this is the topic that I will be presenting today. It's like this outline will be followed throughout the presentation. There will be introduction about what is concrete and how it is being used widely in the industry, and then I will tell about the most important material in the concrete, which is cement. Then I will explain you how the influence of this additives like fly ash and slag have been improving the property of the concretes, and then I will give some insight on deterioration mechanism that affect the concrete in a long term, and then I will get some information about service life estimation, how it's being done and how it will be useful in incorporating this durability based design of concrete structures. So let us see how a trainee engineer at the site, when you are going to enter as a trainee engineer in a site and all, maybe the first job that you will be doing in your site will be concreting, because I got that when I went as a site engineer, and I used to wonder like what were the things I know before going to the concreting business when I joined as an engineer. So I would know there will be a formwork and it will have a steel reinforcement. Then I used to check some cover blocks like that. These are some mandatory checks, like we will check the formwork, we will check the cover blocks. Beyond that, we will see the batching of the concrete, whether it is done properly with the weight batching or volume batching, and we will ensure during the compaction of the concrete whether the vibration is being done. And then after a while, like maybe 7 days or 28 days after the concrete placing, we will find the cube composition. So this is the routine duty of a concrete engineer at the site level. So beyond that, so what we should know about concrete. So when you are going to be a engineer at site, beyond this regular things, you should be having an idea about how the concrete has been evolved over a period of time, and what are the things you should be considering it while you do the concreting and then during the curing process also. So this is very important because the concrete is going to last for a longer life period. So like the buildings design nowadays are for more than 50 years or 100 years. So you should be knowing about how durable the concrete that you have been placing at the concrete element that was designed. So let us move on to the next slide. So here, like this is an all-purpose building material. So wherever you go, you will be able to see concrete. So whether it is a power plant or whether it's a bridge project or whether it is a precast elements or it's a residential building complex, wherever you go, you will be working with concrete. So there is no escape in that, especially in a developing nation like India. Concrete is going to be the ultimate building material, which is cheaper as well as or to say that it is an easy material to make and then place at the site, even with an unskilled labor force at the site under the supervision of an engineer. So why it is a first charge material? As I said, it's a low cost material and which could be easily made at site itself. And nowadays for quality control, we have precast and RMC plants also. So what they do in concrete? So concrete is a composite material which is having a binding medium, and there is a fragments of aggregates, so that will be giving the strength component for the concrete. And in hydraulic cement concrete, so why do I say hydraulic cement concrete? Because the cement reacts with water, and with that reaction the cement paste has been uh, forming a matrix around this aggregate. So that is a composite medium which gives you the concrete which is having a sufficient strength and durability properties that you were intending for the necessary service life of the structure. So what is this binding medium? So there are over a period of time, the cement industry has been evolved a lot. Like, but for a longer period, you would have seen that this ordinary Portland cement, you would have heard like OPC. So this OPC has been used for a longer period, like more than around 200 years, like from 1800s. So this ordinary Portland cement had been a first choice material as a cement. Then at the end of this 1990, like at the starting of this millennium, like 2000 and all, we have to have some guidelines which was proposed for reducing this carbon emissions. So to reduce the carbon emissions, we were going for the supplementary cementitious material. So I will tell more detail about it in next slides. And then there are now alternative binders. I will explain about that also in few moments. And aggregates, as you say, there are two different components of aggregates, like natural aggregates also was there, and which is now in short supply. So you would have heard that this fine aggregate and then coarse aggregates, which are being quarried from the natural resources, are receding. So to save that, we are even going for taking aggregates from the demolished structures, as well as we are going to manufacture some of the aggregates which are like quarry dust, and from manufactured aggregates, even coarse aggregates from recycled aggregates. So these are manufactured. So tremendous challenges ahead in developing this sustainable concrete with newly engineered materials. So the material is getting a lot of changes. It is being engineered to get a maximum output through a lot of combinations and then permutations. So we are doing a lot of research on how to make this concrete sustainable as well as efficient. So that is what we are going to see now. So why do we came across this SCM? So why we have to use this SCMs? So if you see, the cement production has been accounting for almost 8% of the world CO2 emission. So this carbon dioxide emission has been contributing to, has been a huge challenge, and it contributes to the global warming. So as a cement producers, as a civil engineers, we should be concerned about it, because we use cement a lot, and then we are contributing to almost 8% of the world CO2 emissions. So and also if you see, 1 ton of cement manufacturing emits almost 0.5 to 0.8 tons of CO2. So this is a huge amount. So you have to see how you could reduce this, because for every ton you manufacture cement, you are expelling 1 ton of CO2. So that much amount of CO2 is getting out from cement industries. So what are the choices? So when you see how the cement manufacturer has been contributing to the CO2 emission, there are three important processes. Like during the process, that is, when the limestone, which is a major raw material of the cement, has been expelling this CO2. So when you treat the lime at a higher temperature, the CO2 from the limestone, that is the calcium carbonate, will expel CO2 from that and then become CaO lime and then form this calcium silicate during cement production. So that process itself is emitting almost 50% of the CO2 during this cement manufacture. And also thermal emissions corresponds to the fuel that has been added in the cement industry, that has been added to the cement kilns, that is giving almost 40% of the emissions of CO2 from the process. Remaining processes are very minimal, like quarrying and transportation and grinding. So those are very minimal. So when you look at this, you could see almost this process itself is contributing to the 50% of the emissions. And you can see thermal emission also contributing a lot, but that will be dealt by using some alternative fuels. But however, when we can, as a material scientist and civil engineers, we can have an idea about reducing CO2 by adding the by reducing the clinker content by other addition of SCM. So when you add SCMs, you could reduce the clinker. The clinker is the base component of the cement. So when the cement manufacture, during the process, you will be as an end product, you will get this clinker. So that clinker will be ground to cement. So when you reduce the clinker content, you will eventually reduce the CO2 emissions. So that is one of the sustainable solution for the global warming problem that we have been creating. So due to that, what we did, so there are a lot of industrial byproducts or waste materials. For example, fly ash is one of the major source of industrial byproduct or waste material, which is added into concrete, or cement as a supplementary cementitious materials. So there's a tons of fly ash which has been emitted every year through the thermal power plants. So even Thoothukudi has a thermal power plant, so you could get a lot of fly ash from the thermal power plant there, and you could use that in cement industries, which is nearby, like in Tirunelveli you have cement plant. So from the cement plant in Tirunelveli, we'll get some fly ash from Thoothukudi, and then they will mix with, they will grind with the clinker that they have been producing, and then they will bring down the clinker content, and they produce Portland cement, like Portland Barcelona cement, PPC. So you would have heard this term PPC also. So then slag cement also, like if you go to the steel processing industries, you will have slag as the byproduct, and that also has some reactive silica and alumina that will be reacting with this cement hydrated phases, and then it will produce calcium hydroxide and then calcium silicate hydrates, which are the binding product in the concrete or cement matrix. And similarly, we have some waste products like clay, and then second quality limestone, which are present around the limestone quarries, that also could be added to the clinker, and then which could be improving the performance. So these are some of the research that has been going on, and some positive results has been emerged from this method of substitution of SCMs in cement production. So Pozzolanic reactivity of the SCM, that is how much reactive silica and alumina. So if you go back and then see the chemistry, you will see this chemistry of the cement. You will see this calcium, silica, and alumina are the three major elements which are going to have a reaction and then form the binding product. So the presence of this reactive silica and alumina and the proportion of the reactive silica and alumina in this SCMs are the governing factor for deciding how much optimum replacement can be used. So that has been researched a lot. And so now you have to have an idea about how many cements are there. So when you go to site, as a civil engineer, when I went 10 years before to the site, I know OPC and probably to a less extent about PPC. And I don't know what is the difference between that and also. Now I just wanted to give you an information about how different they are and how you should be able to make a decision when you come across these cements in your site in future. So if you see this ordinary Portland cement, now the ordinary Portland cement production has been reduced a lot by the cement industries. Now the proportion of OPC in the market is almost 25% only. So this is like the traditional cement manufacture procedure. So you will get limestone from the quarry, and you will get the clay from the nearby quarries, and so you will take the both and then go for a process called calcination. So preheating will be done. Then after the preheating, the clinkerization will happen in the cement kilns at a very high temperature of 1400 degrees centigrade. So that is a very huge temperature, and it needs a lot of fuel to burn, and so that corresponds to a lot of emission of CO2 also. So then finally the clinker will have this box compounds. In concrete there are box compounds which are calcium, tricalcium silicate, bicalcium silicate, and tricalcium aluminate. So bicalcium silicate and tricalcium silicate are the major. So C3S and C2S are the major raw material that used to bind the cement, used as a binding material. So when it reacts with water, they form the binding material CSH and CH. So when we grind the clinker, it will have 95% of clinker in it, and then some traces of gypsum. Finally, OPC would be made. Similarly, when we go for this blended cements, so blended cements are the cements which are like PPC and then PSC, like Portland Barcelona cement with fly ash or fly ash, and Portland slag cement with GGBS. And additional pozzolans are also available, like some of the pozzolans like volcanic tuff, and they are also having reactive silica. So they also will be used for this pozzolana cement. And we have some, so these three are binary blends, and this is the ternary blend which is having 2 SCM. So you could see either one or, so after the regular cement manufacture process, 1 or 2 SCMs will be added to the clinker, and then it will be ground to form the blended cement. So this is how blended cements are made. And there are alternative binders. So this alternative binders are the binders which are essentially made up of materials which are out of the manufacturing process, or the process which involves in the making of concrete will be different. So somehow there will be an difference either in terms of process or in terms of material while producing a binder. So here, if you see this geopolymer, you would have heard this word geopolymer in last 10 years quite frequently, and maybe you will be using some of geopolymer applications later. So here it will be mostly devoid of OPC. So they mostly use this fly ash and slag, and then they will keep them in the alkaline medium. So that alkaline medium in combination with this aluminosilicate materials, which are essentially slag and fly ash, will polymerize and then form this cementitious material, that is geopolymer, and calcium sulfo-aluminate cement. So here also almost the raw material are similar, but the process of the cement manufacture, it will be different. Like the Elamite is one of the product, like C4A3S is Elamite. So the box compounds formed in the CSA cement are different from what it formed in the OPC. So this Elamite will produce at a much lesser temperature, and due to that, much lesser heat will be generated through the fuel. So that's how the cement manufacturer will have lesser CO2 emissions. So that is one suggestion for alternative binders. And Silite mine. So this is another cement where the entire process will be different. Instead of clinkerization, they will go for an autoclaving. That is a hydrothermal process where cement will be manufactured. And similarly, magnesium silicate cements are also there, where the raw material will be entirely made up of magnesium silicate. So until now, you have seen the cements based on calcium and silica. Here, the cement raw material is a magnesium silicate, which is a green color rock, something like olivine or serpentine, which are available in the earth crust, somewhat lesser than calcium, but still it is widely available. So that could be one of the alternative cements. So when you come, and also some special purpose cement, you would have heard something like sulfate resistant cement, or even rapid hardening cement. So these are some special purpose cements that will be useful in some specific applications, not in everywhere. It could be manufactured in a limited content. So you have a wide variety. Like when you go for a project, maybe a huge infrastructure project, even in a single project, you could be using a different type of cement. So you should be aware of that, and you should be taking necessary measures to have a better durability, durable structures at the end of the casting or construction process. So now we will see what are the significant benefits when we add this SCM. So whether addition of this SCM is giving us some benefits, because when we add some material to the concrete, we should see whether it is giving some benefits to us. Otherwise, adding that is not a sustainable option. So there is one negative aspect of SCM, that people would say that it is not achieving enough strength at an early stage. So for example, for a pre-stressed concrete system, where you may need an early strength at a early strength in much necessary for your pre-stressing process and all, where there might be a shortcoming. But still, when you go for a long-term assessment, this concrete with SCMs outperform OPC every time. Like if you see here, when the replacement level is under 30 and all, still you could see a better performance with fly ash addition or even slag addition than the OPC at 90 days or more than 1 year strength. If you see, there is an OPC is having lesser ultimate composition than this Portland Barcelona cement. But at the early stage, OPC will be much higher strength than this cements. But we shouldn't judge it with 28 days strength. So you should be aware of that. So when you use the concrete with SCMs, you shouldn't judge that by taking the measurement at 28 days. You should at least give some time and then see whether you have enough strength. Like at 90 days, if you see, you could see some of the mixes are performing better than OPC. So that you should be knowing when you use the cement with fly ash or slag in that, and it reduces a lot of heat of hydration. So lot of heat generation will be there as an exothermic process during hydration process in concreting. So that could be reduced when you use the SCM. So for a massive structure like dam and all, if you use this concrete with fly ash or slag, you will generate less amount of heat. So if you see here, in controlled concrete and then fly ash concrete has a much different heat emission. So the temperature changes way below in fly ash concrete in comparison with controlled concrete, that is ordinary Portland cement. So the reduced heat of hydration can avoid plastic shrinkage and thermal cracks. So that is a huge problem in earlier. So when you go next day after construction, if you see cracks on the concrete, there will be a huge dispute between the client and the contractor. So it is one of the huge issues. So when you add SCM based concrete, you won't have some of those issues. So then higher resistance to chloride and oxygen and moisture. So here this is the most important point regarding the durability. So some of the critical elements on the earth which could be harmful for concrete are chlorides, oxygen, and CO2, and then moisture. So if you have a concrete which is having lot of pores and which could absorb these compounds or elements, that could eventually lead to the issue with respect to durability. So that I will explain later about what are the durability issues that are happening. And if you add SCMs in these kind of concretes with concretes, the durability improves. So if you see the concrete which are having very high addition of fly ash and then very high addition of slag. So for example, 50% of slag and 30% of slag, which is having very good resistance to the chloride conductivity. So the concrete with 50% slag and then 50% fly ash, so it's a very high resistivity to chloride. And also when you see the surface resistivity, the slag with high volume replacement and the fly ash with high volume replacement stood alone, and even 30% replacement of fly ash is giving a very high resistance to the entry of this ion. So this high resistance to the ion is very much important in point of view of durability. So next we will see how the CO2 emissions are being controlled. So the main purpose of adding SCMs initially was to reduce the total CO2 emissions. So that has been solved by adding this SCM. So if you see a regular OPC and PPC and then Portland slag cement and even some cements, new cements with elements like limestone, calcium clay cement, you could see always the blended cements are showing much lesser CO2 emission than this ordinary Portland cement. So and also energy consumption during the cement manufacture also is very high for OPC, and it's been reduced for the mixes which are PPC, PSC, and LC3. So this is the addition of SCM that has been observed with our in our industry. So now we will see what are the deterioration mechanism in the concrete. So this is very much important because you need to think about the long-term durability when you choose a material. So there are physical causes for deterioration in concrete as well as chemical causes. The physical causes are predominantly due to this erosion, abrasion, and cavitation. This surface wear can be observed. So the concretes which are going to be in the spray zone or splash zone of the water, or even somewhere it is going to have, like for example, concrete roads which will be severely eroded and then abraded with the tires which has been running over. So there you should be considering about the physical causes of deterioration and then take some adequate measures. Similarly, some cracking due to the crystallization of salts, and also these are the deterioration which is not having any chemical reactions that is happening inside the concrete, and some adequate warning will be given through cracking or surface wear, so that could be dealt much easier when we come across this physical cause of deterioration can be dealt with a caution by providing enough resistance against surface wear, and then cracking, or even we should make some impermeable concrete cover, so that we will see later. And surface and visual inspection can be a tool, and it could be identified easily if there is a causes for this deterioration. So then chemical reaction, this is very critical because we don't know how the profile of available deterioration elements in the particular location. We don't know how much chlorates will be present in a particular location exactly, and then how it will vary over a period of time. And similarly, we don't know how the leaching or how aggressive the water can be. So when the water near industry zones will have a very high aggressive ions that could interact with concrete by replacing calcium, so that could create leaching in concrete. So we don't know these things, so we should be prepared for that at the material stage itself, and we should be able to tackle the problems until the desired service life that we were intending our concrete to uh, achieve. So this is these are some of the chemical reactions that affect concrete. So mainly if you see the corrosion issues, like this here, if you see expansive products, that refers to the expansive products based on corrosion and sulfate attack. And increase in permeability and then porosity is primarily due to the leaching of compounds from the concrete. So when water passed inside the concrete, and then if it could remove the calcium ions from the concrete matrix, then it will eventually reduce the serviceability of the concrete by letting further entry of ions into that. So some major effects due to the causes are loss of mass, loss of alkalinity. So loss of alkalinity will lead to corrosion, loss of mass will lead to a deterioration in deterioration, and then cracking and spalling will be a dangerous thing to have in a structure. So when the structure is at the stage of cracking and spalling, so you could see how dangerous to encounter to go to the structure regularly. So it should be taken care of. So there shouldn't be any of these problems due to chemical causes during the service life. So our concrete should have enough resistance against all these problems during its service life. So then we will see some of the process as such. So some delayed ettringite formation, which is a form of a sulfate attack, and alkali aggregate reaction, and corrosion concrete structure. So we will see in detail. So what is the sulfate attack? So I am focusing mainly on this chemical reaction just because the physical deterioration mechanism could be dealt uh, by site inspection, visual inspection, and then we could take necessary action. But this chemical reactions that causes deterioration must be tackled during the material selection stage itself. So we should know the environment and then design our concrete for a maximum durability. So now for sulfate attack, this is due to the sulfate presence in the external as well as the internal. So when the cement is having an so when the cement matrix is having source of sulfate, so that sulfate later will react with some hydrated phases and then form the expansive product called ettringite. So this ettringite will create micro cracks inside the cement matrix and reduce the strength. So if you see the and also some external sulfate attack refers to the water or soil when the concrete pier is present inside a muddy soil which is having sulfate. So you have a lot of sulfates around your concrete, and that sulfate can come into your concrete and then create the sulfate attack. So when you add some fly ash or silica fume, so you could see there is a reduction in the mass loss or expansion. That means there will be lesser amount of ettringite formation. So the concretes with under sodium sulfate attack will have higher expansion when the OPC was used. When there is an addition of SCN, there is a reduction. Similarly, when the magnesium sulfate was used, the concrete with silica fume and the concrete silica fume tends to show very high deterioration because of much smaller pores. So when there is a lot of smaller pores and ettringite form, so there will be a lot of cracking, and that will create expansive stresses. So due to that, there is a problem with that. But however, when we use super sulfate cement, like when we use sulfate resisting cements, that is type 5 cement, so you will always have a expansive strain which is well within the permissible limit. This was explained here. So as a result, you could see the cracks in the cement paste and recrystallization of vitringate causes the deterioration. So this is one form of deterioration in concrete. And the next one is alkali silica reaction, which is predominant in locations where the aggregates are more reactive. So reactive aggregates, in sense the aggregate will have some strained form of silica, so that will react with our concrete and then form some silica gel. So if you see here, so these cracks are pertaining to ASR, and this white dots are the silica gel which was formed and it was magnified. So this formation of the silica gel, that will be an expansive product, so which will expand and then create cracks inside the concrete. So that is also that will lead to this kind of pop outs from the concrete surface and decracking, and due to that there will be material mass loss, and finally due to the higher expansion with the reactive aggregates, there will be a deterioration, and this will be very much predominant in cements with higher alkalis. So for alkali, the silicate from the aggregates to react with alkali in the cement when there is an abundant supply. So when we have a low alkali cement and then reactive aggregates, you will observe a much lesser expansion. But when you have a high alkali cement and a reactive aggregate, the situation will become dangerous. So when you work in a certain area, if you came to know that there is a high alkali cement that you are using based on the material assessment, as well as when you suspect the aggregates will be reactive, you should be careful about this ASR. So, but however, this is very common in dams and seawalls and subways. But in India, the aggregates are mostly unreactive. But when you work away from India, you should be careful about whether, to know at least whether the aggregates are reactive. So other than that, another major deterioration mechanism here is corrosion. So there are two processes by which the corrosion can happen: carbonation-induced corrosion as well as chloride-induced corrosion. The carbonation-induced corrosion is primarily due to the reaction of this atmospheric CO2 with the cement phases. So due to that, there will be a reduction in the alkalinity, and because of that, there will be corrosion that has been uniform in the process. So if you consider this carbonation-induced corrosion, the steel will be corroded uniform throughout the cross section of the concrete member. But when you go for a chloride-induced corrosion, the failure will be a localized one. So there will be an increased concentration of amount of chloride at this juncture. So the chloride will come through the concrete and then reach the steel level. And when the amount of chlorides present at this steel level increases to a certain level, that can initiate corrosion, and then it will go on, and then which will create higher mass loss. And due to that, the failure will be a sudden. So when you are working in a zones prone to chloride-induced corrosion, you should be careful about it, and then you should make your concrete so much denser that chlorides shouldn't penetrate. However, in carbonation, the corrosion mass loss will be uniform, so there will be sufficient warning before the failure. So in pre-stressed concrete and all, chloride-induced corrosion will be so much catastrophic that may lead to sudden failure. So pre-stressed concrete can come down suddenly if the strands inside the concrete were affected by chloride-induced corrosion. So here you could see the the anode is the steel member, and there will be cathode, which is a portion which are not corroded, and due to this electrolyte concrete, the corrosion is happening. So this is very common problem that you will be seeing everywhere. Even as a maintenance engineer, you should be able to say a solution for this reinforced corrosion when you are practicing. So this will be a lot of maintenance and repair problems that you will face when you are going for a practice as a civil engineer. So now let us see what is this design for durability. So every time when you see a design for concrete or design for steel, the entire process that you study in the course is going towards strength-based design. So you will know how much force is coming over the member and how the internal stresses are developed, and you will give a concrete or steel. You will give a detailing. So, for example, here you are giving a detailing for a concrete member with necessary steel and steel reinforcement, stirrups, etc. So you are doing very well design for a strength-based design. But are you you should be aware of how this durability based design also can cause a significant impact, because most of the failures that has been happening in the structure regarding at the time of serviceability is primarily due to the durability issues. So lot of issues comes up, like when you see a crack due to corrosion, when you see members fall within 10 years or 12 years from a building due to corrosion. So that has become a concern for people now. So people are worried to live in a structure which is showing that it is corroding faster, or even other kind of failures like sulfate attack and ASR. So durability has been a key concern now, and then also it has been a key concern. So now people start to think about how to include this durability into the design process also. So see, there are two different approaches how the durability design can be applied. So this durability based design as a prescriptive based is not a new concept, like it has been in the codes. Like even in IS codes, you would have known, like IS 456 or IRC codes for concrete, you would know that prescriptive based specifications are little bit available. Like for example, you would have came across the minimum cement content and then maximum water cement ratio for a particular exposure condition. For a mild condition, you need this much cement content, this much water cement ratio. So this is the prescriptive base. So you are thinking that giving these prescriptions can ensure the necessary or minimum durability that required for sustaining the service life of the structure for the necessary time period. So that is called deemed to satisfy. Like you are going to design a structure and you think that whatever the suggestions you are giving for minimum cement content and maximum water cement ratio is going to work for achieving the exact service life that you have been thinking while designing the structure. So that is a prescriptive based approach, and we will see the examples of that in the codes. And performance based approach is where you have to give some performance indicators to the contractor who is going to execute the job, and then you must ask the contractor to give this performance of performance by the concrete that has been casted site. So you have to cast the concrete at the site and take some concrete course, or even you have to take a dummy specimens and then see whether the performance specifications are also being met. So that is the performance based design. So for that, we have performance indicators through accelerated tests like chloride, for chloride carbonation, everything, and even for sulfate attack. And we will be ranking the quality based upon the type of material used. So that is the first step. And then for all the material, we may not have this liberty. So maybe there is a new material which is coming for the construction. So you may not know. So for that, if you know some of the properties, and if you are able to get the service life for the material through models, so because long-term tests are very limited, so we don't know the long-term performance of any structure without for a period of time. So we will do some modeling. So we will do some service life models for the deterioration process, and then it will be based on the inputs that has been derived from the durability tests. So we will see how to ensure the maximum resistance against the entry of ions. So to improve durability, we should have a quality cover. So if you see, the strength of the concrete will be pertaining to the hard concrete, and that is the inner portion which is wound up by reinforcement in the RCC, and cover concrete is the governing factor for the durability. So the concrete should have a very good quality cover, and the nominal cover which is necessary for the exposure condition which is specified, and it should be having protective coatings otherwise. So if there is inadequate cover, you should have a protective coating, and it should be properly cured. For example, the concrete with SCM should be cured for a longer time, etc. So we have to make this cover very much high quality, and then it should be governing the long-term durability. So, but when you see, when you have an inadequate curing, so for example, when you are at site and then you are dealing with a PPC or PSC, and if you don't cure your concrete properly, you could have a curing affected zone, like up to the 20 mm. So it has been identified as affected by curing mostly, like when there is a drying happening, up to this process, if it is not sufficiently cured, this concrete will not achieve the necessary size of necessary durability properties, like much denser concrete here. So there is a chance of having a poor loose compacted concrete here, So this curing has become a prime importance in concrete with SEM. So if you see here, this is a set of concretes. When you see, when it is cured without having any curing, so you could see there is a very high carbonation depth at a given time of testing. And if you see the curing is extended to 28 days, you could see the water absorption is also reducing. So water is also one of the source for corrosion, and CO2 is one of the sources. So when you have a sufficient curing, you are able to reduce the risk of carbonation induced corrosion, as well as other forms of deterioration mechanism, because water absorption is a primary cause of source of sulfate and other chloride salts also. So when you cure for sufficient time, you are getting necessary good quality cover at the surface. So that will reduce the problems with respect to durability. So this is very important. We should be taking care of. So we will see what are the guidelines available in the code for this prescriptive based procedure. So if you see, there are some 5 conditions which has been given as an environmental condition. So this is irrespective of type of deterioration mechanism. So they will assume certain conditions and then see whether the concrete lies in that zone. So and then similarly, they have specified minimum water binder ratio and minimum grade for RCC and PCC, and there is not enough information on whether this will be applicable for all the new type of cement that we have been discussing. So there are a lot of new cements coming up. Whether this number, which was primarily based on OPC, PPC, and slag based cements, will be working for that kind of cements also. So we don't know that. That should be given. So this prescriptive approach may not be giving any assurance on the performance of the new mixes which are going to be coming to the market. And similarly, there are requirements for sulfate attack also, but still it is again the minimum cement content and minimum maximum water cement ratio. So there is nothing we could know about new concrete. Similarly, for concretes at seawater also, there is a specification regarding the minimum strength grade which can be used, but there is no information to assess the concrete after the casting, whether it is having sufficient resistance against the ingress of this harmful uh, compounds or elements for the steel embedded in concrete as well as the cement matrix. So here, this is a limits for chloride content. So there also they didn't specify anything for pertaining to the type of new cements, like how it could be varying, because the new cement is having a different chemical composition or chemical phase composition, which is not similar to what OPC or PPC is having. So this is not again specifying the performance of the guaranteeing the performance of the concrete. So let us just have an idea about what is the process which are bringing these harmful elements to the concrete. So here the diffusion is the process where when there is a higher amount of certain salts in one region will come to the salt where the lower concentration is there. So this is a diffusion process. This is very common mechanism in this deterioration processes. And similarly, capillary suction or absorption, when the concrete is sufficiently dried for a period of time, but when it suddenly comes in contact with water, you could see there is a sudden ingress, a sudden pull for water to enter through the pores, and then that will again give some of the salts into the system. So when we have salts like sulfates and chlorates in the water, that will also go into the concrete with this sudden capillary pull. So then again permeation. So this is again under a pressure. So when we give this entry of water through some pressure, so there will be a permeation. So and then migration, which is under electrical field. So this permeation migration is primarily for accelerated test conditions. So that would be related to the natural condition. So here these are some of the performance indicators that is corresponding to the deterioration mechanism. So when you have to worry about moisture ingress in a particular location, you should be checking this water permeability as well as sorptivity based on the standards available. And also when the gases enter, like when the oxygen or CO2 is going to enter into your concrete, you should be having some necessary specifications for indicating the performance of concrete with against this entry of gaseous elements like CO2 and then oxygen, which is again necessary for corrosion. Similarly, for carbonation, we have an accelerated carbonation test. Similarly, for sulfate attack, mass loss and expansion could be characterized by some tests, and then we will have that as a guidelines for performance of mixes against sulfate attack. So when you have a concrete which is going to be exposed in a region where sulfate attack is going to govern the deterioration, you should be able to check whether the concrete which is going to be used there is having a sufficient resistance against this sulfate attack. So you should be able to choose the material right before you construct, and then avoid the sulfate attack problem. So similarly for chloride attack, we have numerous various tests which could be useful, like diffusion coefficient, which is basically the natural ingress of chloride into the concrete based on concentration variations, and chloride threshold is the minimum amount of chloride which is required for initiation of corrosion. So these things I will little bit explain on that in later slides. Again, now can this one parameter, so for example, in different exposure conditions, we may have 2 to 3 mechanisms which may govern the performance of the concrete under a long-term durability issue. So we have to see whether a governing process of transport mechanism is one or various things. So we may have to have multiple parameters. So not just one performance indicator or one performance durability indicator will not be sufficient to give an idea about the long-term diffusion process, because due to the seasonal changes also, and due to the availability of salts in the environment and then water also, there will be changes. So we have to define a criteria based on multiple performance indicators. So when you have a concrete in a permanently submerged condition, you should be able to have a define a strength criteria, which should be a minimum strength that should be used, and also we should have some 3 to 4 durability indicators which should be which the concrete which is going to be placed in a permanently submerged condition must be adhered to. So when you are executing a concrete in a permanently submerged condition, for example, so you should be considering all these numbers. So like when you go and then do a test after sufficient curing period, or after 1 or 2 year of inspection, the concrete at the site should have this amount of performance which is expected to give a intended service life. So when you need a particular service life, and if you decide to have a 50-year service life, and in a tidal zone, you should always have a surface resistivity greater than 50 kilo ohm centimeter. So this has been put forward to the codal committees and all. So now our next revision of IS 456 will have some of these numbers. So when you go for a site as an inspector or even an inspector, you should be having an idea about this numbers which will be present in the codes, which is primarily based on the performance-based specifications. So these numbers will help you to decide whether to accept the concrete at the site or decide or reject the concrete at the site for deciding the quality. So similarly for carbonation also, there is oxygen permeability index and then carbonation rate, which has been used as a measure to determine the durability, in addition to the strength criteria that has been proposed. So for achieving this intended service life, we should have these kind of qualitative criteria for durability. So however, this instantaneous measurement, so yes, you are getting this performance indicators at a particular time, but you may not be able to know how the pore structure of the concrete is evolving. So concrete is always having some moisture with it. So there will be a continuous hydration and then continuous pozzolanic action. So eventually the concrete will either get denser or it may get leached out due to external influences, and then the pore structure and that will be changing always, and also the environment also will be constantly changing, because when you see the CO2 levels 100 years before, it is like almost 100 ppm lesser than what it is today. Like 300 ppm in 1900s is now to up to 450 ppm now in 2000. So the environment is also changing, the concrete is also changing. So the measurement at the one moment may not be able to sufficient to predict the long-term performance. So that is why we have to go for a probabilistic service life estimation. So what is probabilistic service life estimation? This is a technique where service life of the concrete is estimated by considering the variability on the input data also. So that is why we are going to use this probabilistic service life estimation as a important tool for generating a design-based durability guidelines. So, for example, in a chloride-induced corrosion, it is governed by a fixed second law. So, when you want to know how much chloride is present in a particular point of concrete, so if for example, if you want how much concrete is present at this zone, and if you know the diffusion coefficient of the concrete and time of exposure, you will be able to calculate that. So, based on the fixed solution. So, using this as a base equation, we could be able to calculate how much chlorides can be present at the steel level at any particular time, which is t. So based on, so using this, we could calculate the service life of the system. That's what I'm going to say. And these are some of the various equations which are available in the literature. Like there are various service life forms. Like even this Life 365 is a very user-friendly software. Even anyone can download and then see how the choice of material and then property of material can affect the chloride induced corrosion, over a period of time. So this Life 365 is very useful, and other models are also available for determining the chloride induced corrosion. So here I would want to define that, like now service life needs to be defined first. So you should be either defining the service life based on the initiation period or propagation period. So normally initiation refers to the time taken for the sufficient amount of chloride to reach the level of the steel to initiate corrosion. So this is a longer period of time. So normally always most of the calculations will consider corrosion initiation at the end of the service life. But however, this corrosion propagation also can go for up to 6 to 10 years, and still you can work with this corrosion propagation period for extending the service life. But always to be under conservative side, corrosion initiation has been considered as a service life of the structure. So from here, whatever I say as a service life refers to the corrosion initiation that has been occurred in the concrete structure, either due to chloride or carbonation. So this is the service life that I am going to define from this slide at all. So like we did a study, like we had made some 7 concretes with ordinary Portland cement, with Portland Pozzolana cement, that is PFA, and then LC3, which is a ternary blend of limestone and calcium clay. And then we had made 2 different concrete grades, and then we tried to took data from the concrete, like durability data like diffusion coefficient, and then we had calculated the aging coefficient that will be giving us the post structure evolution over a period of time. And if you calculate the diffusion coefficient, so this is how we calculate diffusion coefficient. So we will be taking the powder from the concrete at the surface, and then we will measure the chloride levels until the steel interface. Like if you have a cover depth of 25, you will take chloride at every interval, and then we will calculate the diffusion coefficient. Similarly, this is the chloride threshold, like amount of chloride that is required for initiating corrosion. So that has been also calculated based upon the corrosion test. So these 2 are more critical parameters which is governing the chloride induced corrosion. So based on that, now this is the input parameters that we used for calculating the service life. So if you know a diffusion coefficient at 28 days, and if you know how much surface chloride concentration, that is how much chloride that has been present near the concrete, that may be either from the water which is around the concrete columns or piers in the sea, or it may be airborne chlorides which is present 800 mm or 800 meter or 1 kilometer away from the coast. So that is what surface chloride concentration at the level of cover of the concrete. And this is the aging coefficient, which is like with respect to time, there will be changes inside the concrete with respect to the post structure, and that will be considered with this aging coefficient, and this will be consistently changing this diffusion coefficient with respect to time. So this is at 28 days, and our aging coefficient will change the diffusion coefficient from 1 to 50 years or 100 years, whatever we want to calculate. And chloride threshold will be a constant value. Similarly, we have cover depth, like every service life should be having a cover depth that we should consider. So that is what we have been specifying. So we consider 75 and 50 mm for the study. So here, if we consider a girder of a bridge, So we had tried with 3 different binders, and then we saw that under a chloride-induced corrosion, we could see the concrete with the ordinary Portland cement is showing a probability of 100% corrosion or corrosion initiation when at 100 years. So when we want to design a concrete for 100 years with OPC, it's almost impossible with when there is a chloride in this. So eventually we have to look for other materials. So what are the other materials? So we have this ternary blend LC3 and then binary blend Portland Pozzolana cement. So if you look at those two, we could see that there is only 50% of chance of corrosion. So it's like quite safe. And if you look at 50 years as a service life, we could see that the probability of corrosion initiation is under 50%. So these are a better choice of binders for the concrete element, like for example, a girder element to be constructed in a place where chloride induced corrosion is more prone, like for example in marine structures. So it is always recommended to go with PF Portland Pozzolana or other ternary blended systems. So this has been calculated to establish how we could do the durability based design. So based upon this service like tool, so this is a MATLAB code where we have given those input parameters which was discussed in the previous slide, and that input parameters were able to give this probability of corrosion initiation for a particular concrete type. And with this, we have been trying to, we had developed some nomograms. So this nomograms, it's like some guide design charts. So I think in reinforced concrete design, there are some design charts for designing columns and beams. So similar to that, so that is like strength-based design. So if you want to have a structure for 40 or 50 or 60 years, you should be able to choose some diffusion coefficient that your concrete will be required for achieving necessary service life, and then you will be calculating how much chloride content that would be expected at a period of time based upon the location of the structure. And similarly, you will be able to choose how much cover depth that you will have necessity. Like for example, so for a chloride content of almost 2.5, so you may have to have a diffusion coefficient of 5 into like 10 to the power minus 12, and then for the achieving the diffusion coefficient as well as extending the service life, you should have a cover depth of 60 mm. So this is a nomogram. So you should be reading from here, like if you have a chloride threshold as some number, and if you have a diffusion coefficient intended as some number, you will have a necessary cover depth to achieve the intended service life. So this is how we used to develop this nomograms based upon the service life calculations. So nomograms for different binder types and then exposure classification has to be made, and those will be a very good tool for calculating this durability for a concrete structure over a period of time. So that is the design based durability. And similarly for chloride carbonation induced corrosion also, this could be adopted. So here the critical parameter will be carbonation coefficient. So to calculate the carbonation coefficient, you need to have an accelerated test or natural test. And for different binders, you have to calculate this carbonation coefficient, and then you have to determine the corrosion initiation time. So time taken for this carbonation front. So that is the carbonation front is reaching the steel here. So this might be having a higher possibility of corrosion now. So this has to be calculated for carbonation also. And these are some of the models which are available for carbonation. So which could be eventually modeled as I showed for chloride. And we can generate design charts for carbonation induced corrosion also. So here, so semi-probabilistic models or deterministic models can be developed using this expressions which were given in the codes, service expression. So finally, what are the advantages of this performance-based specifications? So depending upon the need for the power, so if you need something in a particular location, so if it is a chloride rich environment, you will go for a member or a concrete which is suitable for that. So that can help you to achieve the owner's expectation regarding the structure in terms of durability. And we have a lot of unique materials now, and then we have different material combinations, and we have a lot of expertise also in this area. So combining all these, we are going to provide a performance based specifications that will be very much useful in extending the service life of the concrete structure, or even trying to help the concrete structure to have no repair or during the service life. So more durable product. So when there is a no intervention or for that means there will be no repair during the service life of the project. So then there will be no repair cost. So that will eventually help you to have a much lesser life cycle cost, as well as much lesser material consumption over a period of time. So in that way, the design of durability has a lot of potential to optimize the material availability as well as the cost of the project. So way forward, like what are the challenges? So just this is a summary of what we had discussed so far. So here I have just introduced you about what are the challenges available in the market for the durability based design. So there are a lot of materials has been uh, coming up, and you don't know exactly each material how it is going to behave, and we don't have any guidelines because since the materials are keep on updating, so we don't have a solid guideline. So we have challenge in optimizing what should be the material composition and what should be the geometry of the structure. And similarly, we have lack of knowledge on the long-term performance of the each material. So where some cements like calcium sulfoaluminate or even silicate are just under development. So we don't know how it is going to perform in long term. So we have to do some models, and we have to see accelerated test as an opportunity to test those materials. And climate condition is also consistently changing, and then it is affecting the natural weathering process. So concrete is naturally weathering every day, and the process is changed because of the increase in CO2 content or increase the variation in the patterns of rainfall. So those are affecting the structure. So these are a huge challenge in this in front of this durability based design, and we have to see the opportunities like we have to develop some tools like the nomograms I had introduced you. So those kind of design charts should be developed based upon the service life models, as well as we have to revise the codes for performance based specifications. So that has been going on, like ISO 456 is now being revised very much to cater the need of the industry with respect to durability also. So there will be a lot of durability based specifications will be present with newly revised IS 456 that is going to come up in this year or later next year. So then we have to also see how when two different mechanisms are going to have an effect on the service life. So these are some of the opportunities of research are available still, and still a lot of challenges are present in the field of concrete technology. So you will have very challenging professional experience ahead. So it's like you have to be well equipped while going out of this institute, and you have to consistently learn. So you can't stop learning at any point and then think that this is going to come for my entire career. So the materials will evolve, and environment is also changing. So you have to be constantly updated about everything. You should know what are the new materials available, and you should know what are the good practices available, and you should know what are the conditions of durability that has to be met, and also everything you should be updated. And this is a good opportunity to share this to you. So I am very happy about it. So I would like to thank to my thesis advisor, Dr. Pillai in IIT Madras, and also Dr. Gettu, Dr. Santanam, and Dr. Ramamurthy. So these are the teachers that I have been learning concrete from, and I am still learning concrete every day with them. And all the material scientists and academicians and engineers working in the field of concrete, because concrete is not it's a very unique material, and it has a lot of challenges. It is been governed by a lot of principles, like everything should be perfect, like material should be perfect, and workmanship should be perfect. So then only we can be able to achieve the intended durability. So for helping us to achieve the intended durability, the durability based design will be useful in the near future. So all the best to everyone, and thank you again for FX Polytechnic for giving me this opportunity to present this webinar to you. Thanks.
Good evening to one and all present here. It's a privilege for me to thank everyone who support us to conduct this webinar in a smooth manner. I thank our management for giving us the opportunity, our beloved chairman, Mr. Klitas Babu, managing director, Mr. Arun Babu sir, for our principal, Mr. D.P. Rufus. I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. R. Sundar, for his valuable ideas regarding the durability of structure. I also thank all the department heads, webinar coordinators, and the staff for their cooperation. Last but not least, I would thank all the participants of this session. Kindly fill up the feedback link to do us much better. Thank you all.